Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm going to show you another game from the finals of FIDE Online Nations Cup. With Wesley So losing against Yu Yang Yi, the pressure and the onus was on the rest of three players from the team US to score a win in their games, because if the score lands 2-2, the match and the trophy would go to Team China. So here's Fabiano Caruana playing against Wei Yi with white pieces, not Wang Hao. Wang Hao had a terrible record against Fabiano Caruana in this tournament. He lost to both colors and reached some complicated positions, and in some cases didn't deal with the openings that well against Fabi, and Fabi had a very good time in this tournament. He was, I think, the linchpin, as I would quote, who turned the things around, who gave results at the desired time, and really led the team very well. And from Team China, it was Yu Yang Yi who, again, with his win, gave Team China a, I should say, a cruise control, a pole position to win the trophy. And he has been spectacular throughout the tournament. For me, the man of the tournament has to be Yu Yang Yi. But let's come to this game between Fabiano Caruana and Wei Yi. So Fabi with white pieces plays 1e4 and Wei Yi responds with the Scandinavian defense. It's quite unusual. We don't see this in top level games and against the strong GMs like Fabi or Nepo, Magnus, Nakamura, Dinglirin. These kind of players don't play Scandinavian at the top level. But here we see here the normal line, and here most notable moves are queen a5, queen e6 check, but he goes for queen d8, another respectable move, d4, g6, bishop c4, so normal developing moves. Black's intention is to castle on king side, but normally we see e6, this bishop comes out, not there, but there. The bishop comes out, this knight comes out probably here or here, this knight comes out, then c6, queen lands on c7. These kind of positions we see in Scandinavian defense, where black tries to attack in the center by castling queen side, but here Wei's intention is to castle towards king side and try to take a safer approach, because Yu Yang Yi was playing terrifically well, not terrifically well against Wesley So, and it was quite eminent that rest of the Chinese players would like to play a safe line, or I should say a drawing line. Just need draws and you'll be through. Whether the score is 2-2, you're still through. So probably that's why this fianchetto towards the king side. Fabi continues his development. Knight f3, knight f6. Both sides castle, h3 stopping bishop g4, that this pin is always annoying, knight c6, bishop f4, b6, and now d5 from Fabi. So he's pushing this pawn to the extent and also hassling this knight, and knight has to go to a5, which it does, attacks the bishop, so bishop goes back to e2 and e6. Now with this move, Wei is somewhat trying to gamble his position and is trying to improve this position, because here in my mind what I think that he's not happy that this pawn is here, so he's trying to eliminate this pawn, and this pawn also hinders some of his development, like bishop b7 stays, although it attacks the pawn, but it doesn't do a good job. You're staying at the b7 square, and this knight is somewhat restricted. It cannot come here, it cannot come here, it cannot come here. It has to compromise itself to b7, and so he was quite unhappy with this. And normally you see these kind of positions in the Queen's Indian defense system that white plays, and with this move b6 there is somewhat Queen's Indian system that Wei is trying to follow through the Scandinavian system, which I assume that he might be comfortable with. But but playing e6 is somewhat giving Fabi a chance to get a pawn. Let's see. D takes, bishop takes, and weighs down a pawn. So what does he have for the pawn? Well, to a first sight he has this open file, and basically, well, the first thing is this bishop attacks the rook, so rook has to do something. So rook comes to c8, and now he gives up this, but the bishop goes back to e5 in this position, and after knight c6 bishop goes to h2. It seems like waste of time playing bishop e5 and then playing bishop h2. So in this position I assume that Fabi just miscalculated a little bit and gives time to this knight to come here, and this knight was very peculiar at a5, so this gives knight some squares, especially on b4 and d4 and also e5, which it controls, and these are very crucial center squares also. So bishop f5, so we try to take this pawn, and good move from Caruana, that's g4, and it's not possible to take the pawn on c2 because after bishop takes c2 there's a very good move in this position, knight e1, and this bishop somewhat looks trapped here, and it's not easy to pull this bishop out from here. In fact, it's almost impossible to pull this bishop out because after knight d4 there comes another shot on black, and that is bishop a6 attacks this rook, and this rook isn't placed very safe here either because after, let's say, rook e8 he has to play bishop d6 and this rook is gone. So that's the problem that black is facing, and obviously if after say bishop a6 if you play rook d8 then bishop e5 attacks the knight, and this bishop has no squares, it cannot come to any of these squares, it cannot come here or here or here, it can come here but I'll show you why it cannot come here also. As after bishop takes c2 knight e1 is played, and if you play bishop e4 try to pull this bishop out, then this doesn't work because of after g5 two pieces are hanging, and this knight, either you have to give this knight away or to give this bishop away, and that is a winning position for white here. So after g4 where he doesn't take the pawn, instead he plays bishop e6, and white takes the initiative by playing rook a d1. That's a very good move indeed to take the open file, and you are a pawn up, so initiative is by your side. Knight a5 from Wei, so he's trying to play knight c4 in this position, but I assumed that he would play knight c4 in this position, but after bishop e5 he plays bishop c4. I think knight c4 would have been better, try to challenge this pawn and this bishop which sits quite well on this e5 square, which it wasn't doing on this h2 square, but I think his intention was that if he captures only then I will play knight takes c4, and that position would be better for like, but he overlooked this move rook fe1, which brings this rook into life, this rook into the action, and he's somewhat forced on the back foot and has to play rook fe8. He's trying to put more pressure on e5, although it's defended by the knight, but somewhat it can come into the play, it can come into the game. Let's see how it goes. Knight b5, so x-ray defense, and bishop takes e2, rook takes e2. Now this is a very good idea. What does this do? It defends this pawn as well, and that's why knight c4 was essential rather than bishop c4 which was played. He plays knight c4 but it was too late. Well, here Fabi takes this on a7. But let's have a look at the move like rook de1, where there's a very much wonderful line here that black defends a6, knight d6. Looks like there's a fork, but no, knight can recapture. Knight takes, bishop takes, rook takes, and rook takes. And now what? Notice what is going on. This rook defends the second rank. All the pawns which are lying on the second rank, c2, b2, a2, they're all defended by this rook. But what happens after knight takes a7? There's knight takes e5, rook takes e5, and now this rook isn't defending this. So it gives a chance to play rook takes c2, and this rook is very annoying in the second rank because it is attacking this pawn. It can potentially attack this pawn, and if you try to defend this pawn, then you're not at the attack but rather at the defensive, at the passive side of the position, which you do not want, especially when you're a pawn up. You don't want a passive side of position which gives some bit of equality in the position, and this is quite annoying for Fabi, as you can see. So he plays g5. So now if this knight moves, then this rook hangs. So rooks were taken, knight takes, and knight e8, attacking the knight by the bishop. Knight a c6. Now rook takes, then this knight takes, and if bishop takes, then this knight takes. So that's very good defense. So bishop takes anyway, knight takes, and now rook takes b2. That's the point, to give up this pawn, which was the reason of knight takes a7 being played. And this inaccuracy, it's somewhat, give chances to draw to Wei. Well, let's see how it goes. Rook d8 pinning the knight, king f8 is forced, rook d7 putting pressure on this f7 square. A simple move like knight g7 would have been better. So if he plays king f8, and I don't see, with black still on the b file defending this b pawn, putting pressure on a pawn, that white would be able to progress even after capturing on f7 with any of the pieces, be it knight or be it rook. I don't see how white can progress. And not to forget, the extra pawn would be on the same side as both kings are, so it won't be easy to convert. But here he plays rook e2, which was somewhat sort of inaccuracy from Wei's part, because now after rook takes f7, king g8, the only move, rook e7, and suddenly there is no point, and there is no way that you can attack this knight. And with this rook perfectly defending on the second rank, there are chances of discover tactics, which we will see. Rook e1 check. Better would have been to play any other move, let's say king f8 or knight d6 or knight d6, but it was too casual in my point of view. Without king h2, knight g7, knight takes g6, and white is 2 pawns up in this position, and this rook is defended. Pawn takes not possible because this rook is hanging, so he has to go again to rook a1, knight e5, rook takes a2, so he's trying to create his own passed pawn, which he did. Knight g4, defending this pawn. Rook was attacking this pawn as well, so knight g4 defends. If h4, then we will take en passant. King f8 attacking the rook. Rook goes behind the pawn, and here if you play rook b2, try to defend the pawn this way, then king g2. Simple. The pawn is defended, and now knight is free to land on f6. It's a hopeless position anyway. There would be no way to defend this pawn on h7, and instead, if he goes after this move, if he goes rook a6, then knight f6 is winning anyway. you will simply gobble up this pawn on h7. There's absolutely no way that black would be able to save it. So after rook b7 he plays knight e6, h4 from Fabi, just protecting this pawn. Rook a4 attacks the knight, king g3 defends the knight, and now knight d4, knight h6, knight e2 check, king f3, knight e4 check, king g4, knight e6 check. And here what I thought that he could have played king f5 just to push his king towards the opponent king, and also it would have attacked the knight, so this check won't have been possible. And with all these pieces towards the king, the game would have been over then and there, but he chooses king g3 and Wei resigns anyway. So this win was a good morale booster for the team US, but Wesley So lost his game to Yu Yangyi, and the bad news awaited the team US that Hikaru Nakamura and Irina Krush drew their games, which meant that China and US tied in the super final, and with China finishing first in the prelims or in the league stage, China wins the FIDE Online Nations Cup. Congrats to Team China. It had been a spectacular performance, and especially from their man Yu Yangyi, who didn't give a sniff to their opponents. He did look rusty in the previous round against Wesley So, but he served the revenge as it is best served in, which is in the finals. He beat Wesley So quite convincingly, and that was the reason why Team China won. So that was my coverage from FIDE Online Nations Cup. They were my analysis. I hope you liked my analysis. I'll be covering more games. I will be covering some classics, and I will be covering more World Championship games, because World Championship games are the souls of the chess tournaments, the chess games. We have learned so much chess through World Chess Championships, so I would be bringing them. Up to now, stay safe. Cheers. Bye.